Well, let's just go back and come back again. I don't know what that is. We don't want us to be on there, do we? That's what that's
No.
about. We can still see her. She can hear us though.
Hi, yeah, we can hear you.
Well, this is weird. This is different than the one we just looked at before. It just came on and was
Well, we
going.
didn't, yeah, I know, we didn't have to do
We
anything.
didn't have these options.
Yes, so some of the breakout sessions are Zoom links and then some of them are YouTube links. And so this is a Zoom link and the other one, did you just come from I believe it's Kaylin's session?
Yes, yes.
Yes. So Kaylin's session is being live streamed by a company that we've hired out. And the other breakout sessions are being live streamed with just our own technology that we have here on campus. So it looks a little different.
Okay, so I'll just mute ourselves and we'll still be able to hear when she starts talking, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very
Sorry,
much.
it's a little confusing, but
It's okay. Thank you. I'm not very techy.
no worries. You figured it out. You're here, you're in the right place. So that's what
All right.
matters.
Thank you.
11:15.
Okay, we're gonna go ahead and get started. It's 11:15. Thank you guys for coming. I hope you are all just as passionate about transition planning as I am. I'm Kim Atkinson. I am the Special Education Administrator for Unit 5, and I'll go into more about me in a minute. I didn't realize what the lived experience panel was going to be, but can I just say how much I loved that this morning? That pretty much sums up everything that we're going to be talking about today, is how can we as school and families support individuals with disabilities to, establish a foundation for an adult life that they thrive in. And it is very difficult, and it takes a lot of people and a lot of coordination, and it doesn't always look pretty along the way. But that's exactly why we're having this session we're having today. Okay, first I want to kind of get an idea for who my audience is today, at least in person. Sorry guys, online. Do I have any parents of individuals with disabilities? Excellent. LBS 1 teachers, related service providers, community partners. Excellent. All right, so we'll do a little bit for everybody. A little bit about me. My background is as a school psychologist. Have my master's degree in school administration, as well as the director of special ed endorsement. I worked as a school psychologist for Urbana for several years before joining Unit 5 4 years ago. So currently I'm the administrator for Eugene Field School just down the street. It includes an 18 to 22 transition program, as well as we call it the VTAP work program for all of McLean County Unified Schools. That is the DEP/PECT, the new acronym, work program. So we call it VTAP. We have about 150 student workers between my school and the 2 high schools here at Unit 5. My passion is on transition planning, vocational training, all of those things is what I live and breathe every single day. Has anybody here visited Field before? Yeah, so I've seen some of those friends before. We are open to visitors all the time. So if anybody ever wants to come see what we do, learn more about our teams, you are absolutely always welcome to come. Here are our mandatory objectives. My goal is that you can leave with some tangible concepts to help your transition planning, as well as with some resources for those of you that are local, some tangible resources that are here locally, but as well as things that are more statewide. When I talk about transition planning, I am not talking about IEP forms. I will not talk about IEP forms. I don't like the IEP forms. You can have a good transition plan on an IEP and a horrible transition plan. So I talk more about transition planning holistically about all the things we're going to talk about. Hopefully there's ways to put that on a transition plan and an IEP form. We have to do them. We do them. It's fine. They are not the focus of our planning. They're not the focus of our meetings. They miss the boat on a lot of different things. So this is not how to write a good IEP transition plan. So when should we start transition planning? Anytime, all the time, at any age. Your transition planning is planning for the day that your student no longer has the structure and services of a school system as part of their daily routine. And that is a big deal. For an individual with a disability, their routine is a lot. And when we think about our time in school, besides all the access to therapies and resources that schools provide, the structure of the day and the amount of prompting, either planned prompting or unplanned prompting, just like in a high school, you have periods, you have classes, you have bells that tell you where to go and when you're done being there. And what do I do when I get to class? You're going to do your warm-up activity. What do I do after warm-up? You're going to do this. I have my whole schedule listed out of what I'm going to do. And who's going to tell me? It's classroom management. We're preventing behavior problems. We're keeping people engaged throughout all of school. And then when school is gone, you're left with an entire day, week, month, life of what are you going to do in your time? And that can feel unsettling for many of our students, and that can be anxiety provoking. So our goal, especially through our program at Eugene Field, we take away all the bells. We take away like the set courses. We take away the schedules, and we try and get them used to and comfortable with the idea of being an adult, making decisions, navigating your day, problem solving in a less structured way. And it sounds counterintuitive to all the time we spend as educators structuring for our students. And so we spend our 4 years with them destructuring them so that their life with us matches as much as possible the life they're going to lead as an adult. So transition planning can start at any time. We focus on work, recreation, socialization, health, finance, activities of daily living. I'll cover each of those in this presentation. For me, it can start at any age with the intentional layering and fading of student supports, with a focus on developing independence. So when you're thinking about, instructional supports, related services, visuals, cues, prompting, all the different things, it's identifying what do they need, providing what they need, but going in with the belief and a plan for how am I going to know when they don't need that much anymore, and what's the next thing, what's the next step. What can they start doing on their own? So like paraprofessional support, fantastic support. Many individuals need that support. But what is the plan when they don't have an adult for them anymore? So when they exit school services, just because maybe they have a funding source that can pay for personal support worker, it's not a 24-hour worker. They're not available all the time. And there's a lot of competition for resources and to find good employees and to find things that are going to work for your family. So our goal is to help the student find the skills that they need to be as independent as possible, so that families and that student aren't as dependent on physical resources when they leave, because there aren't a lot of physical resources available for adults. Not a lot of communities have a lot of options. So the more we can help our families and our students be as independent as possible is going to help them throughout their transition. So that's transition planning for us. We're also planning for the best and the worst case scenario. We don't know what adult life is going to bring our students. So at all times we're planning for maybe they can have a full-time job, maybe they can live independently, or whatever that best case is for that student. But also, what happens if they can't? What do we do if something happens to the family? What do we do if they require 24-hour care? What do we do if their aggressive behavior never goes away and then we can't find places that will accept them for 24-hour care? So trying to have plans navigating both ends of the spectrum is hard, but it's necessary to always have plans. And the closer we get to that transition helps us identify which version of the plan we're going to go with. And then always being open to new opportunities and that it can change at any moment. For example, we had a student, based on the severity of their disability, kind of having one idea what transition was going to look for them. They're probably going to need a group home. They'd maybe be able to do supportive employment, but maybe they'd be more like a community day program type of adult. But the more we were engaging with the family and learning more about that student and their family's needs, we found out they were the highest functioning child in the home, and there were multiple children with disabilities that were more severe. And that student was already in a caregiving role for those individuals. They were cooking, they were doing cleaning, they were doing some supervising. And so we immediately shifted our focus for transition planning and increased our expectations for their communication skills, changed their vocational skills to the point where we had about 2 years left that we could work with them. They ended up in a paid position with a dishwashing job full-time with the school district. They have transportation that they can use independently, so that the parent didn't have to focus on what that student was really going to need at the time, because within the next year, there were 2 more children with significant disabilities that were going to be exiting that they were trying to plan for as well, who weren't going to be on track to get any kind of employment or to be able to qualify for 24-hour care. So really just trying to be an open and thinking about what the families were going to need. So here are some must-dos for all of the students to have conversations about and help facilitate families getting these across. Get your student a state ID. You can get a regular ID. There's also an ID for individuals with disabilities. That student or that family can decide which one is best for them. Not all individuals with disabilities want that so clearly advertised, all the places they are showing their ID. So that is a personal preference about how they would like to have their identification. In order to get a state ID, you need to have necessary identification documents, such as the birth certificate and social security card. And these documents and a state ID are required for applying for most assistance programs, like Medicaid, Social Security, funds. They require all of these things. Many of our families that we work with have lost track of the Social Security card. So you can request a new Social Security card, but you have to confirm their identification. And if you don't have a state ID, There are other things you have to have, like maybe a piece of mail with the student's name on it. Well, maybe that student's never gotten mail before. So really thinking through, there's a lot of loops where you're trying to get access to something and you need something else to get it, but you can't get it unless you have the thing that you're trying to get. So it's a process. So working with families to help them obtain the documents. If their birth certificates are local, that makes it so much easier. Not all of our families are residing in the same place that the children were born. In every state, in every community, has their own requirements for how to request a birth certificate, how to do it online or over the phone or via fax if you're not physically in person. And if you don't have all the right identification for that individual, it makes it even trickier. So it's a bigger process than I think maybe we can take advantage of when it's just you or I wanting to go get an ID or a driver's license, trying to do this for an individual with a disability. So that's something the school teams can absolutely help with. We take students to the DMV all the time. The families do the digging, they provide the documents, we'll help them navigate the system, especially if it's complicated. But you know, if they're not able to take time out of their day to go to the DMV, which can be a pain, we'll do it. We'll just take the student and go to the DMV and help out. Absolutely have conversations about power of attorney versus guardianship. And this can happen at any point during secondary to have them start thinking about what does shared decision making and access to medical and financial information look like for your family? Because this starts in high school, even though the legal changes don't happen until they're 18. You don't want to wait until they're 18 to think about how that's going to look. There are, you know, information, the guardianship isn't for everybody. Not everybody needs a full guardian. There's partial guardianship. A lawyer is required to set up guardianship. So definitely consult with an attorney. Power of attorney is something that is super simple to establish. We often will do power of attorney just in-house through the school. I will show you access to a form that is super easy. Individuals just sign it. So the parent and the individual, assuming everyone is in agreement, can do a simple power of attorney for health, a power of attorney for property, which includes finances, or a combination of both of those. So we'll talk a lot about that with our families at IDP meetings. We will never make a recommendation of which path we think they should go on. That's entirely up to them and to the student. And by that point, we have so many shared conversations and a lot of student voice involved that families tend to know, can that student make a decision? Do we have an established relationship for shared decision making or not? So Illinois Legal Aid has a ton of information about guardianship and power of attorney. This specific link is about power of attorney, answers a lot of questions so we can help families gather the information they need to know more about POA. They've maybe heard about it through like hospitals or medical things, but not really understanding how it relates in this situation. And then at the very bottom of this link, there is a link to a form for property and a form for healthcare. And you just fill it out on a PDF on the screen, print it off, both individuals sign it. Doesn't have to be notarized, doesn't have to be anything like that, because the individual can rescind POA at any time. They can change their mind. They can say, you are no longer my POA in the moment. So it's highly dependent on the relationship that you have with that individual and the communication. A lawyer can draft a POA that it is really specific about these are the types of decisions that we're going to make together. This is what we're going to do. But even in that situation, the individual can rescind it at any time. So, but here's a quick and easy way for them to be able to leave your school with a power of attorney. Sometimes I'll have parents who have difficulty navigating all the legal systems that are going on and maybe an individual needs guardianship. Maybe they're nonverbal, they have a significant disability, but trying to obtain the legal assistance and navigate the court systems can be hard for a lot of our families. And we can only help so far with those kinds of processes. So at a minimum, even if we can't do much to help them get guardianship, we can ensure that they have a power of attorney so that anything medical were to happen to that individual, that we know that they at least have some rights and somebody can talk to them in that moment. So we try and help with that as much as we can. So Illinois Legal Aid, lots of resources. Okay. Next, we're going to hit on transition planning, all those different domains. I'm going to start with work because that's what I'm so passionate about. All of our students at Eugene Field spend half of their day at work. Sometimes their entire day is at work, as well as all the high school students that we work with. The first step with teams or families is kind of choosing between paid employment and or volunteer work. It's a choice upon exit, not a choice during vocational training. Vocational training, I believe all of the students should have vocational training to some extent, but whatever the district can provide. Work of any kind, including volunteering, greatly impacts the well-being of adults with disabilities and provides a sense of purpose. It's a huge piece of their adult life. And helps fill the void when school is gone. It gets them social, it gets them physically out of the house, and we'll talk more about health impacts, but it really helps with their mental health and their sense of community and being a part of the community that they live in. It is also a requirement for many group homes or congregate living facilities that they are going out and doing something. Work is a great thing. There are some benefits that require that you're working, such as there's new things with SNAP where you have to document that you're working so much. There's loopholes, there's ways to work around things and not everybody has to do it, but it's more forms, it's more paperwork. There's a lot of processes for that. But the expectation in the adult world with disabilities is that individuals are working if they can work. And the systems believe many people can work, even though it can be very, very difficult to obtain employment. When it comes to obtaining employment, there's lots of supportive employment options out there. The Department of Rehab Services is fantastic. I know locally there's some amazing third-party agencies that provide the job coaching, such as Lifelong Access, Bridgeway, but they will not get your individual a job. It's up to the family to help leverage what they can to get that employment, to get that first experience. So the agencies can help with applications and interview and practicing those skills. Once you get the job, they can help with orientation and job coaching. They can help you support that job up to a certain extent. But getting the job, getting an employer to say yes is the hardest piece. And finding a job that's the best fit for your student strengths and needs and sensory needs can be difficult. So what we have found works best for us, and we have gotten many of our students into paid employment, even students with significant disabilities. And a lot of it starts with, in the schools, we leverage our relationships as well. We have 150 students in this community right now working in a vocational training program that's been established for over the last 20 years. So we have relationships established with employers where they know the training that the students have received. And when we say, hey, we know the student can do it, despite how they're going to interview or what their forms look like, we have that relationship there. That's not available in all communities, and we know that. So we talk to families about thinking about their bubble. Where do you go? Where is your, who in this community are familiar with you or familiar with your student? Is there anything, any service you can provide? Are there any sites where you could start volunteering and kind of building that trust and that relationship? And maybe someday that could lead to employment. I have some families who will talk to their neighbors about what their neighbors maybe need. And some families are like, well, I could use like my financial stuff shredded. So they have a shredder in the back of the minivan and they have a route and they go around and they pick up the shred bins and they shred in the trunk and then they have a schedule. And that's a service that they're providing. And that provides that sense of purpose and work for that individual with a disability while they're waiting for a potentially paid employment opportunity to maybe come up. And I say opportunity because they come up at any time. And I never know when they're going to come, but we will completely shift tracks on our scheduling and transition plans when an opportunity comes up with an employer or with a site where they're willing to take a chance. And we're like, all right, we're all in. What do we need to do? Because those opportunities don't come up often and you have to maximize those when they do come up. And the same thing happens for families. They're at an event or they're out in the community and then they're talking to somebody and somebody says something like, oh, and it's an employer like, oh, well, I have a sister with autism. I know all about autism. Like, oh my God, it's an employer who actually knows something about autism. Do you ever hire me with autism? Or like you get rid of some of that fear in the community. So leveraging those relationships are really important. Some tips. Don't focus on a forever job. Start by looking for entry-level positions in an environment that suits their strengths and needs. Some students will get fixated on specific titles or places. Like I had a student who was really into crumble cookies. They love crumble. Where do you want to work? I want to work at crumble. What do you want to do at crumble? I don't know. I just want to work at crumble. But they didn't actually have the skills or the interest to do any of the jobs that were actually there. If a student wants to be an astronaut, That's not a realistic option for them. So getting them to think about work outside of what specific titles and objects are there. Focus on resume builders. So the importance is to show an employer that you have those employability skills, you can navigate a work environment successfully. It may not be the career you want for your life. You maybe are only going to work there a few months or a year. But when you think about any other young adult joining the workforce, you're gonna maybe flip burgers and clean while you are establishing that you're going to be a worker that can, before you get a full-time custodial gig at a school district. It might take some time. So focus on resume builders, get their feet wet. They may fail the first time. I will never discourage a student from applying for a job. Our students apply for jobs all the time. Even though our students are able to do many, many different types of jobs, getting a call for an interview is really hard. And their applications, we help them with their applications, and getting a job at an entry-level position, there's a lot of competition to get into those positions. So never discouraging them, but sometimes they're really fixated on something, and that's okay. Some of our students are kind of stubborn, and they don't always take all of our suggestions that we have. And it's okay that they start a job and maybe they get fired. It happens. Something happens, they get fired from a job. Our goal is that we're able to learn from it and apply that knowledge to the next job. That's the goal of employers too, when they're looking at your resume. Okay, you weren't there, we did a reference check. Like, can you in an interview talk about what you learned from that experience and how that's going to help you in your next work experience? It gets more troublesome as individuals are being more stubborn and they're not changing their behavior with the next job. And so by the time they get to third job, where you're seeing an employment history of multiple failed employment and kind of that short window of time without some success in between, you're going to get a lot less phone calls in terms of interviews. And it's going to be a lot harder for them to get those starter jobs that they can build off into the future. So once they start having multiple work failures, if they're still within our program, we're having a little bit more harsher, realistic conversations about making good choices about the applications and the jobs that we're getting and what's not working, because they'll reach a point where an employer will look at their work history and not deem them as employable. And there's not a lot that we can do to convince employers to take a chance unless we're able to leverage something else in the relationship or in the community with an employer. But on paper, an employer is just going to completely dismiss them in the whole pile of employees. So focus on success, focus on resume builders. Don't be afraid to try things that are hard to make mistakes, but making sure that we're learning from the mistakes that we're making. Another thing that we see in terms of the most often reason students are having difficulty maintaining their employment is their response to accepting critical feedback. And that could be their performance feedback. A whole part of our vocational training really comes around, you were there to do a job. This is what the employer is expecting of you to do. Our students sometimes have a different perspective about what their purpose is at that time and what the task looks like. The end product could look the same, but their path to doing it could be different than what the expectation is of the employer. And in some places, that's not okay with the employer. There are sometimes that there are very specific ways that sites want to have things done. And so they'll often give feedback and give chances. Many of our students can feel like that means that they're doing a bad job or that that person doesn't like them. So what we do in our vocational training is we basically flood them with critical feedback. It's part of being an adult. They get a quarterly performance review from their job coach or their supervisor about their employability skills, their communication, and their problem solving. Maybe even personal hygiene comes up probably quite a bit. And we're giving them that feedback. And then when they're doing their job tasks, we're letting them make mistakes, we're letting them try, but then we're giving them feedback and an opportunity to kind of self-regulate, to work through that, and to change their behavior to match what the employer is looking for. So we provide that opportunity all the time. But this is probably one of the #1 areas that our students have the most trouble with. when they get to employment is what do they do when they're giving feedback about their behavior, maybe their social skills with employees, maybe a specific task that they're doing. Can they kind of shut down whatever their initial thought might be, their impulse, self-regulate, and change the behavior in a socially acceptable way? Sometimes they can, sometimes they can't. Okay, some resources. Social Security. We hope that all of our students can obtain employment that will support them as adults. That's not always true. That's our goal. That's what we hope. So some individuals do need supplemental income in order to thrive as adults. We do encourage anyone on Social Security to also try and work. If they're capable of working, we would like for them to work, even if it's 4 hours a week. That's fantastic if they can obtain paid employment. Volunteering is still fantastic as well. The process to get SSI can take almost over a year if it's successful and goes well. So if that's something a family needs and maybe they're dependent on that income, letting them know to start early, start at 18, start that process first. It takes a really long time. You're obtaining a lot of documents, and you might get denied at first. So that one just takes a really long time. If the individual is also going to work at the same time, I never want somebody to choose not to work who could work because they don't want to impact their SSI benefit. There is a service that is provided through IATP, the Illinois Assistive Technology Program. It's the WIPA grant. Anyway, if you go to their website, they have a WIPA section. You basically call this phone number and their job is to help you navigate this part of, hey, I have this job. This is how much I am getting paid, how many hours I'm working. How can I expect this to impact my Social Security? Or I'm considering this job, or they're asking me if I want to work more hours. I'd like to work more hours, but I'd like to know how this impacts my Social Security benefit. Their job is to help families navigate that. There's always a percentage that might change, but they'll never 100% take away their benefit. And sometimes it's better for the individual. You might not even need Social Security. You might be making more money without Social Security if you worked as much as you are capable of working and are interested in working. So that phone number is important if you're going to navigate work and Social Security. I will say if the individual is in paid work while also part of a vocational training program through school, so many of the students in my work program have paid employment already, that money, that pay doesn't count against their Social Security benefits. So some of them already have Social Security, they're getting their monthly check, they're in paid employment, but their employment is part of our vocational training. They're the site that we're working with. It doesn't count, but then we have to guide them. When they do exit, it does start counting. So then they have to kind of make decisions about if they're working too much, maybe they don't really need Social Security. Maybe they, at this point, we're on the path of employment and we can revisit Social Security in the future if we're having difficulty with employment. But that phone number is very important. All right, next we'll talk about recreation and socialization. So in the morning panelist, she discussed kind of loneliness being a big issue that faces adults with disabilities. I have seen that as well. I volunteer on a board for a congregate housing facility here in town. And so we do a lot of the intake and like check-ins on how the residents are doing. And isolation is a big problem and it continues to be a big problem. So physical activity and socialization greatly decreases when students exit school, resulting in weight gain and isolation. So many of these programs have activity expectations. The expectation is that you're leaving your room, you're leaving your home, that you are engaged in your community, you're engaged in the world, you're engaged with people, because it adversely affects their physical and mental health in such a significant degree. And sometimes there are also program requirements. Well, they will exit you from that facility because you are not complying with the behavioral expectations of the program. And you are taking up a spot that is not available to somebody else who would comply with the program. So there are some adverse consequences outside of health as well. So you could lose access to resources if you're not doing this. And I mention this because it is really, really hard to become active again once you become solitary or sedentary as an adult. We know this as just any other adult. Once you stop doing things, it's really hard to start doing them again. And we have to be really intentional. So when we're transition planning with families, What are those connections that they have made? Are they an active family? What are they already doing? Are they connected to special recreation? We want to make sure there's a plan in place, a routine that establishes where they're not leaving school and then immediately they're just going to be in their home, in their room, on their devices, in their own little world. So some suggestions that we have: connect with other families and take turns engaging in recreation activities in the community. It's hard to do this as a family on your own. Connect with other families with adults with disabilities and see if you can partner with each other, almost provide respite for each other and engagement, so you can kind of tag team some activities. Create a routine or schedule around physical activity and recreation. So our students do thrive in routines, and we lose a lot of those routines when we exit school. But maybe a routine is every night after dinner, we go for a walk around the neighborhood. Maybe every Friday we're going to the Y and we're swimming. So what can we do to create some kind of schedule or routine where we don't lose that physical activity that they've already established? Individuals really need people to engage with them. They are less motivated to engage in physical activity or recreational activities on their own. If you were to ask them to choose between staying at home and watching a video or going bowling, they might choose staying at home and watching a video. But they are more likely to go and engage if their people are going with them, or if other people are doing the same thing. And then sometimes once you get them there and other people are doing it, they're more likely to go along with the idea. We can't always be the ones going with them because it's hard to navigate a working family and navigating adult with disability. But hire another young adult. Maybe every Thursday you hire an ISU student to take them to the mall or take them out to eat and take them to go play something that they enjoy to do. Hire somebody to go do that. That can greatly help their motivation to actually engage in the activity. All right, so this next section is super vague, but it's pretty much everything else. So activities of daily living. So how to just live day to day as an adult. So there's very little to fit all into one slide, but here's just some general takeaways. So most individuals can assist in their own care in some way. So thinking about personal hygiene, daily chores that you need to do around the house. So all living situations outside of school, outside of your family home. There's responsibilities for chores, there's responsibilities for food, there's responsibilities for personal hygiene. Include them as much as possible. You know, increase their responsibility over time. Utilize task analysis. So even individuals with significant impairments, they can participate in some way. They can engage in some way, even if it's just a tiny piece. We want them to feel included in their care and not that their care is happening to them. Use assistive technology, use it adaptations, especially with laundry. Our students absolutely love the flip and fold. They may use the flip and fold at their schools and their programs. So if anyone worked retail and had a flip and fold, you just put a shirt or a sweatshirt down and it's got the little tabs. You just do it. We'll put numbers on the tabs. They know what to do and they just flip it, fold it, stack it, and they go to the next one. The repetitive nature of the task is something that many of our individuals with autism absolutely thrive and love doing it. So vacuuming and flip and folding are like the #1 tasks our students love doing all day. Can't usually get them all off the bat. They love it. Other things. I mentioned IATP earlier with the SSI with the grant. So the Illinois Assistive Technology program down in Springfield. If you have never visited that, put it on your list of places to go. They have an entire smart home established where to make a home accessible physically. If you have visual impairment, hearing impairment, they have smart appliances. They have adapted cooking equipment. It's just fascinating. So if you've never gone, I would definitely go tour the place. Gives you a lot of ideas about what could be possible. And most of the stuff that they have you can buy off Amazon. So we've purchased a lot of the items, trained the students on how to do them. If it's something that really works for a student, we'll let the family know so that they know that they can incorporate that technology with them. And sometimes it's just as simple as a one-handed can opener where you just hit a button. That was fantastic. So we have a lot of students that only have the use of one hand. as well as the safety knives to be able to cut without any significant danger. So giving them opportunities to be independent in places where safety historically has been a problem. When we're thinking about physical bodies and safety, so we prioritize learning skills that give them the most autonomy over their physical bodies. We model how to ask for consent before touching others. This helps reduce the risk of exploitation and abuse. So that's one of those scary things that families and school teams, you know, we think about, keeps us up at night when we think about what could happen and how somebody could be taken advantage of as an adult or misperceived. So that kind of goes on all ends. And sometimes our students will engage in behaviors in the community that someone else could perceive as a threat to someone else. And so we really work hard on trying to curb some of those behaviors and help our teams out with that. But we really want to make sure that our students are comfortable voicing their opinion about their bodies and saying no if they're not okay with something, and asking permission before we're touching them. So for example, that could be like, may I touch your arm so that you can be more sturdy on the stairs? So my job as a parent may be that I'm supposed to like hold their elbow when they're walking up the stairs. And they're just going to do that. And sometimes in school we take advantage of, yep, that's just how we're going to do it. And the students accept it, and that's fine. We want them to have some more ownership over who they allow to touch their bodies, and when they're allowed to do that. So just kind of including them in that. So for example, personal hygiene, are you ready for me to wipe? Like, we both know this is going to happen. Like, this is my job. It's going to happen, but I can do it on your turn. And even if a student is nonverbal, if you've worked with nonverbal students, you know they know how to say no too. Like, there's a way. Even if they just use eye gaze machines, like they come across when they're not okay with something. And so we know to respect that, give them some time, and then approaching it later. Because everyone's going to want their body clean. It's going to work out. So just setting the tone and modeling that for families, so families know how to train support workers in the future to kind of reduce the risk that could come across later. Especially in areas where vocational training isn't as prevalent or doesn't have as many opportunities for experiences. Many of the daily living and work skills can overlap, such as following a schedule, gathering the necessary items for a task, and putting them away where they belong, and completing tasks with the expected quality. Those are all things you can do in your home, in your school, at work, where you're having skills that are going to help across multiple settings. So if you can't necessarily get a work setting, what work skills can you really incorporate, or independent living skills can you incorporate into their day? Safety is another issue. So if an individual does not know, or often in my case, they know the information, but they can't communicate it to a stranger, whether it's anxiety, whatever it could be, they can know their information, but not be able to say it to a police officer or EMS or somebody trying to help them. Make sure that you have a card they can carry in their wallet, use temporary tattoos or alert bracelets so that somebody knows the information that they need to get help to the student who's out there. You can also register with the local police department. Another thing that we work on a lot is trying to extinguish or find alternative behaviors for any behavior, and not necessarily a bad behavior. It's not like there'd be behavior plans of this behavior is really bad, it's causing all these problems. But if it could result in the individual getting fired or the police called in the community if they were to see it, that's what we focus on. We prioritize on those skills. So when we're thinking about transition goals, we're talking about IEP planning and what we're going to work on in schools, we're thinking about what we know about that student and their needs. And if somebody didn't know them, didn't understand them, could it get them fired? Or could somebody call the police if they saw that happening? Be concerned by it. So those are the things that we curb and really focus on as like red flag behaviors that we're give our immediate attention to. And then there's lots of other skills that we work on as well. But those are the big ones that we hope to have taken care of by the time that they've exited. All right, health. Our families are often transitioning from pediatric providers to adult providers. And if you've ever had an insurance change or you've needed to change your entire family's healthcare providers because of that, it is not an enjoyable experience, especially if you're in an area where medical providers are hard to come by, or if it's a specialty that's hard to find. Just help our families realize that yes, they can carry their student on their family insurance till they're 26, great, but they will eventually have to be on Medicaid to receive PUNS funding. And Medicaid can be secondary while they have their family insurance, but you don't want to go through the process of identifying an adult provider, changing up the system, establishing trust with a new team, and then you realize they don't take Medicaid, and then you have to find a new set of providers again. So this just kind of helps reduce how much change they have to experience, and help families find new medical teams that are going to work and meet their needs. Just please let families know they really need to start looking for their evaluation paperwork from the original diagnosis. Whatever the condition is, they need to have the evaluation paperwork. Has anybody worked with families trying to get on PUNS in the last 12 months? How fun has that been lately? It's been great. So there's been some changes in how that goes on. And so now families need to produce the original evaluation paperwork of when their student was identified with autism. Not the first time a doctor diagnosed it, the first time they were evaluated for autism by professionals with a report, which may not have always been the case. We were talking about 20 some odd years ago. And those documents may not always exist. Families may not have kept them or know where they are. And they may not remember who that doctor was or what that facility was that they went to when their kid was 2. So giving them as much notice as possible before they need to produce that document is very helpful. So they'll have to produce those documents when their name is pulled for PUNS, and then they go through the official eligibility process. So that's just our role. We can help let them know that that's a thing that they can start looking for. As special education teams, special education records are temporary records, which means they are destroyed within 5 years of a student leaving the district. So if a student has moved multiple times, or they are initially identified in a different district, before those records are destroyed, families receive an email to their last known address and given the opportunity to retrieve those records. That doesn't always happen. And so those records may not exist. So if they are in your district and you do have those records, the best thing that we can do to help families is help them request the records from their initial evaluation, their initial eligibility, the first time they were identified with autism as a label in school, because sometimes they'll accept those records as well if there isn't a medical evaluation. So anything that shows that the disability was present during early childhood is what's going to help them moving forward. So I could probably give an entire session and talk all day about PUNS and the lovely new nuances to the process. Individuals should know their diagnoses and what medications they take. That's important for safety and self-advocacy. They should know what they're taking and what that does to their body so that they can communicate to doctors and providers and care workers if they're noticing any changes. And they should know what their diagnoses are because people around them are going to be talking about it. They're going to be going to their medical appointments. And it shouldn't be the first time that they learn that they have autism. It's also good for advocacy because they're going to be in a work setting. They talked about with the panel this morning, being open and honest with the people you're around, hey, I have autism. This is what I need. This is what you need to know about me so that we can have a successful experience together. Totally fine. This next part comes from my work working with the congregate living facility, which is not 24-hour care. It's not a group home, but individuals have to be independent with their medication in that type of living environment. So teaching individuals to read medication labels and instructions if possible, even over-the-counter medications. If they are unable to fill their own pill box, can they responsibly use a pill box that's been pre-filled? See if some adult services will not administer medications, and therefore additional or more restrictive services may be necessary. So in the example of the living facility that I help with, they won't do pill boxes, they won't give meds, they don't monitor meds. They will help make sure, do you need a refill? Do we need to go to the pharmacy? Do you have medical appointments? I'll get you to your appointment. So then parents either need to hire a personal support worker to take care of the meds and fill the pill boxes and administer the meds, or they have to go to 24-hour care and they have to go to a group home. So even though that individual could live more independently, there's one piece that's keeping them from accessing that. So that's just something I like to educate families on so that they know if they feel like that fits their student, that they can work on that skill and see if they can safely administer and take their own medications or not. So just something to look at. Anything related to medical services can complicate adult services. Certain services will provide certain medical services and they'll define what medical services are very differently. So if somebody needs to take insulin because they're diabetic, if they have epilepsy and maybe have emergency medications, if they require tube feeding, all of those things highly complicate adult services. And those are things that parents need to start talking about early on in transition about in your area. When you think maybe my student's going to go to that day program when they exit, call that day program and ask what medical services they'll provide, because they can say, no, we don't do that. And we just need to have conversations and make decisions based on that. And then we talk about power of attorney. Ensure you have power of attorney for medical or a release of information signed that you can speak with adult providers. So once they turn 18, unless you have guardianship paperwork, doctors don't have to talk to you at all. They don't have to give you any information from the ER. They won't send you back. They won't do anything. And it's a horrible, horrible nightmare to try and think about, which is why I push so strongly trying to do power of attorney for medical during IEP meetings. Finances. There's so much with financial planning with individuals with disabilities. Identify what financial accounts are currently tied to their social security number. So that's the important piece. You might think like, well, they don't have any income, they don't have any assets. But if their social security number is attached to something like one of those 529 college plans that you set up when they were born or a grandparent set up for them, those are considered assets and may impact their benefits. They account, when you think about social security, there's a cap of what your financial benefits, assets can be. It counts towards those. And if you're hoping to change those accounts into something else, you have to do it so many years before somebody's going to financially audit you. So those are things you should start like in middle school, making sure that you know what are the financial accounts tied to the individual so that you can make any necessary adjustments before you might be having a financial audit through Social Security to see if you meet the requirements for eligibility for Social Security. So fun little tip. Determine if you need a special needs trust. An attorney is always required to establish a trust. If you want to set aside wealth for your adult with a disability to help for their care for their lifetime, you need to have a special needs trust and have that set up through an attorney. That is the most secure way to ensure if something were to happen to you, that financially they will be taken care of and they will be able to access that wealth in such a way that it doesn't impact their benefits in Social Security. So again, having assets in their name that don't count against their ability to access Medicaid and Social Security or SNAP benefits. Consider opening an ABLE account. This is a great way to save money. So with Social Security, the expectation is you get this monthly check and it is to pay for your monthly expenses. And that money is essentially gone each month and replaced each month with a new check. Their expectation with Social Security is that you're not saving. But saving is a really fantastic skill we want to teach young adults to be able to do. So if that is something that is possible in their financial situation, I encourage opening an ABLE account, at least for the minimum of them being able to have some kind of savings experience, because they can direct deposit their Social Security check into an ABLE account and be able to use that like a debit card. They have a debit card attached to that account and be able to make expenses. The rules for what you can buy out of an ABLE account, it's just anything that they need for their day-to-day living needs. They could go, I mean, that's recreation, that's leisure, that's food, that's groceries, that's bills. It could be pretty much anything. Special needs trust, it's very specific and limited what you can use those funds for. That would be for medical expenses, long-term facilities, nursing home services. Those are very specific. ABLE accounts are very loose. There is a cap into how much money you can have in that account, but it is a healthy cap. It's very nice. So students would have a decent savings account that they could use and have some savings to do some long-term purchasing. Maybe they want to buy something bigger, but it's hard to save money and still stay within the Social Security limits, of which I think is like $2,000, which is not very much. So ABLE account, super easy to fill out. You just go online to the Illinois ABLE account website and set it up. Ensure that the individual has a checking account in their name, and it can be a joint account, in order to deposit paychecks. So we work really hard to help our students try and get paid employment. You need to have a bank account set up for that check to get deposited into, and it could be an ABLE account as well. Sometimes, again, when we go back to the beginning, identification, of what is needed to set up a bank account. So making sure they have the ID, they have that information, and then the people who need to know how to access that information has that information, or power of attorney over finance, or a joint account. So can you stop a check? Can you call the bank and stop a check? Can you call the bank and make a complaint about a charge or something like that? Can you access and monitor that? Can you set up alerts if there's some kind of transaction, any transaction over $50? Do you want an alert so that you know about that? Setting up those kinds of things. If their financial skills aren't strong enough that you can trust them with a debit card attached to a checking account that has what we would consider a large amount of money, where they could potentially overspend what their budget is, look into something like a green light card or a Cash App card. So it's like a Venmo card, PayPal card. They all have credit cards, debit cards now, where you basically take money out of the checking account and you're loading the card. So say they overspend, but if you only have $50 on the card, they're not overspending over $50. So it gives a little bit of peace of mind to the parents, while also giving them the autonomy to buy something they want to buy because they want to buy it, which is a really big skill that our students have. And they should have the right, as any other adult, to buy something, even if it's dumb, and even if it's just going to get broken and lost. They have that same right, just like you or I have. For the green light and the Cash App cards, the green light card does have like a subscription, kind of like Life 360, like there's some subscriptions, there's some fees with that. The Cash App cards, I don't believe there are subscription fees. It's just you load it, it's connected to maybe your Venmo account or something, and you go from there. So next is just kind of what IEP planning talks about. I don't spend a lot of time talking about the IEP process or IEP planning because we honestly don't really talk about a single IEP form in our IEP meetings. Don't tell anybody. So we'll survey families before IEP meetings, kind of determine their plans, what connections do they have, what are they currently seeking. Sometimes our families don't turn in surveys. Does anybody have that where they're trying to transition plan and nobody's turning anything in? That's fine. You know what? We're just going to ask the questions and we're going to talk about it in the meeting. It's not going to, we're not going to use that as a barrier for us to engage in transition planning with them. Students will complete a presentation discussing their strengths, their interests, areas of needs and weaknesses, what their preferences are related to work, living, and other transition topics. They always get a voice. We're never going to tell them not to pick something. We might ask them, like, do you want to live on your own in like an apartment? Do you want to live with friends? Do you want to stay home with your family? And they may say, I want to live with Uncle Joe. Great. That may be a horrible idea and not realistic, but you know what? That's their idea and that's their plan. And so that's part of their plan and we'll talk about it. And then families will have conversations about that. And that's just honoring their voice and whatever their transition plan is. So we'll talk about that. They always go first. So they'll put their voice out first about what their hopes and wishes are. We'll talk about what the families say, kind of what their plans, what their hopes and wishes are. Facilitate conversations between the student and their family and see where they come with a lot of things. We focus on making sure we have conversations about puns, Social Security, Medicaid, guardianship POA, and finances at every single IEP meeting. Every single IEP meeting, we talk about it. And where are we at on those things? Do they need any help? Are there any barriers? Is there anything that we can do to provide assistance? We have a tracking sheet where we have all of our students and who's connected to which agencies, because our goal is that they're connected to at least one of them when they exit, that there's at least one source where there could be financial benefits to support the family by the time that they exit. Hopefully they have more, but we work really hard to track and make sure that nobody's falling through the cracks with a lot of these and that we can provide extra assistance as needed. The focus of our meeting is on continued progress towards independence and achieving personal goals, increasing linkages, and planning for routines after exit. This is our entire meeting that we spend. When we think about our IEP goals, we're thinking about what are the specific skills or behaviors that that student needs to work on in order to be more successful in a job or to be more successful in a shared living situation. So things that could potentially get you kicked out of something are fired. We're going to focus on those as skills. We still work on budgeting and money and a lot of the functional things as well, but those are the big transition goals that we have are some of those soft skills that are harder. Maybe it's problem solving, maybe it's asking for help, maybe it's self-regulation, maybe it's accepting critical feedback, those types of skills. Our meetings are less formal. Like I said, we don't go through We talk about everything. We talk about what's going on, what they're working on. Everything is based on their functional skills that they're doing every day, and making plans for next steps. We're just not going IEP page to IEP page. At this point, we're not talking about accommodations and modifications. These parents have heard this 1,000 times. The last section here is to share, some of these are local to this region, the ROE 17. So the TPC, the Transition Planning Committee that we're part of, all the local school districts, created this website last year. So 99% of it should still be accurate. There might still be some things that have left since then. So this is the website. There are several areas. So if you go to support services, you will find, if you're looking for mental health counseling services, there's contact information for all of those different areas. Housing, if you're looking for what is available for group homes, once there's definitions of SILAs, and the different waiver programs that come through PUNs. Reminders about Medicaid. If I want to know about McLean County Housing Services, here's the list of places that have group homes, the congregate housing services. That's what I work with. Here's respite services that are available to families, and then developmental training. So locally, we have one community day program. Other counties have other things. So again, for those of you not in the area, not as helpful, but some of the things, like there's more information about PUNs. There's information for Social Security. Every county or at least region has a group that is there to support. So here we have the Family Community Resource Center. Every area has a place that has the local grant to provide that service. So even if you're not in this area, somebody in your area has this grant to provide this service. And you could work with even your local like PUNS office probably knows who they are. So that is available everywhere. Legal assistance, the list of lawyers. Sorry, if anybody ever worked with Todd Bug, he was amazing. He was our go-to guardianship guy. He retired, so don't call Todd. Different lawyers and stuff that could help with them. So this website's available to anybody, and we're going to try and keep it up to date. The different job coaches. Long Access, Bridgeway, Best Studies, Epic and Peoria, which is also a fantastic place to tour if you don't have been. So excellent resource. So that leads me to last night. Are there any questions here in the room? Go ahead.
So you mentioned early in the presentation that hire somebody to help out with it. Is that type of service covered by PUNs?
So it would be covered by a personal support worker. So that is a service that can be covered by PUNs. With PUNs though, you're allotted an X amount of money. And so if you need 24-hour care, if you need a group home facility, that's going to take a lot of your money. And so there'll be X amount maybe left over to cover some other things. So that might be enough. It might not be enough. If you want a community day service program, and so you want them to go to a day program from 9 to 2 every day, that's going to take a lot of money. And so you may not have enough money to pay for a personal support worker to administer meds. You might be able to. So it's all part of like a budgeting experience. And when you get pulled from PUNs, you have like this menu experience where they walk you through. You think about your big needs. Your big needs are residency, and day services. If they need day services, what are they going to do during their day? If you don't need a full-time day program and you're going to be maybe supportive employment, or you don't work and so you're able to kind of be home and they're going to be engaged in kind of like an alternative kind of schedule and work on different things, you might have more money available. Because some families, when they're doing home-based services, you become their personal support worker and you're the one hiring and you're getting the money and doing things like that. So it's just a budgeting option. It's a whole menu. There's therapies, there's services, but the big ones are community day programs and residential facilities. So that just depends on if that's possible. It might just have to be you, but you might have to hire somebody to do it, but to use PUNS funding is if you have some. But it's at least allowed.
There's some questions.
Sure.
We had someone ask if the employment is not related to the transition program, can it impact Social Security? I heard you say that the employment during school can be associated with the program that does not impact until the school ends, but some of our students have jobs outside of community partners.
Yes, so in order for a paid job while they are still a student, there is a form that has to be filled out from the school that verifies that their employment is part of the vocational training program. So we have a contract that we have their supervisor sign that says that they're a part of our program. Our vocational coordinator connects monthly with the supervisor and with the student. We don't provide job coaching, but that makes it part of the program. So then they're part of vocational training. They're in our course for vocational training. But if that is not established, and it does not exempt them in exercise.
And then they wanted you to repeat the smart home demonstration.
Right, IATP, the Illinois Assistive Technology Program in Springfield.
And then one more question. How do you assess skills to help find a good fit for a work experience?
Yeah, so assessing skills to find fit for work experiences, a lot of times it's the toss in the water, see what happens. That goes well for us. Our students start vocational training, they're sophomore or junior years of high school. And then if they continue on and have more extensive needs and continue on to 18 to 22, we have 4 more years with them. And so they will go through 1 or 2 training sites every single year where it's half their day. And we try them in various activities all along. So have we tried them with food? Have we tried them in custodial? Have we tried them in manufacturing? What kind of settings work for them? Do they need something small? Do they need something loud? Like what are their needs? So each time we have an experience, we kind of cross off what works and what didn't work. And every time we're working on vocational skills, we're only ever focusing on soft skills, employability skills. So even though they may be doing custodial tasks, that may not be the vocational goal we're working on. We're working on their ability to follow a schedule, to take critical feedback, to problem solve, and to communicate with their coworkers. And we can do those in all sorts of different skills. So they may not have really liked custodial work, and we're like, hey, you know what? They're not a fan of custodial work. But a work skill is working at a job that maybe you don't love, but we're working. And so that's still a work skill that we're working on. So it's just giving them as many experiences as possible. Yeah, go on.
You said for Medicaid, that they would need to have like the initial evaluation, like IEP.
Maybe, and that's for puns.
Okay, so if the student's been out of the district and the records are gone, and they use an IEP that they have, even if it wasn't like it shows the initial.
So a general rule with any of the places you're going to apply for things is if they ask for something specific, like the initial IEP or the initial diagnosis of something, and it doesn't exist, right? Because sometimes it doesn't exist anymore. There are other ways. So basically you're then collecting evidence that supports your claim that if this is what happened, this is when they were diagnosed, so maybe other IEPs are there, but you don't have the right one. You have medical documentation from doctor's visits. You're basically just collecting whatever evidence you can. And then they kind of go through like almost a secondary review with a professional. You might have to do another outside evaluation, but they really want to know, especially with PUDs, if it's a lifelong disability and has been present since early learning. So you're just gathering at that point as much information as you can to support your claim that yes, my child has this disability starting from early on and it continues on now.
And hopefully your IEP has their initial eligibility date at least listed. Even if it's a later IEP, there's a spot.
Yeah.
It doesn't always happen, but hopefully it's there.
So you're just compiling as much evidence as possible, and then you're just making your claim, and then they just kind of audit the situation case by case. Medicaid's not as complicated. You just need evidence of the current disability. PUNs, they're now looking at, they need it to be lifelong and have started early on.
Someone wants to know, does your program cost?
My program at Eugene Field, so we are a public school. We're part of Unit 5. All students that attend Unit 5 it's a free public school program. Thanks. Thank you.